we claim to have fellowship with him and yet walk in darkness, we lie and do not live out the truth. It's 1 John 1:6. And that's what we're seeing in the world all the time. I hate constantly finding myself reading scripture and looking for scripture that illustrates the hate and division that is promoted, or not promoted, but that we're warned about in the Bible. We're warned about many wolves in sheep's clothing, many false prophets, many people who would be led astray. And we're seeing that type of division, that type of hatred foamed up, where we're seeing people led to claim one thing but live out another, to claim they love God, meanwhile they are hating their brothers. They are walking in darkness because this world preaches darkness. I saw some headlines today reading about Kamala Harris, where she's pandering to the African American crowd by promising free loans, like loans that will be forgiven to only black men, and they are promoting to give these loans out to black men to get started in the legalized marijuana industry. And when you think about that, it flies in the face of everything they stand for to preach about equality, and they get away with it because they've demonized, one race of people for so long. Well, not for so long, but they've created such a fracture between the races that they can say this because they've demonized a generation of people who had nothing to do with the racism in the past of whites versus black, or whites over black. I didn't grow up in that kind of world. Again, I got bullied by, more black kids and white kids when I was growing up in Baltimore. Race was just, it meant nothing. You judged the person by how they treated you, and I had the good and the bad on both sides. It's like, but we're so conditioned to look at race, and the fact that we live in a world where it can be justified and people don't blink an eye when they hear that a person running for president is promising loans that don't need to be paid back to only black men to sell marijuana. Just think about that. All the people who were locked up, who went to jail, who were arrested for smoking marijuana in my day of growing up. That was something a couple times I messed with it, but I had a lot of friends that got in trouble for weed. Obviously it's legalized in California. It's not in many states. But to be pandering to that crowd to offer free money to start weed businesses, what does that say about society? It's just scary. And then I know there's therapeutic uses for it, but come on. We're to be of sober mind, to have sound judgment. It's hard to have sound judgment when you are not of sober mind. And I know there's therapeutic reasons to help people with pain, and I'm not knocking any of that. I think it's better than a lot of pharmaceuticals. I'm not going to pretend to know anything beyond that. But let's be real, that's not the majority of people's intention when they get weed. It's not for therapeutic reasons, especially when it's legalized, especially when you're promoting black men to start up businesses selling weed. That was always illegal where I grew up. But now it's being promoted. So the people that are recreationally using it, we're promoting all sorts of things that are not good, that are pulling us away from a relationship with God. But those who claim to know God but walk in darkness, their fruit is exposed for being rotten and not living in the truth. 1 John is a very powerful book. I highly recommend it. But just to see the way we're being divided by race, by sex, and so many different types of sex. Our God-given natural sex, our sexual identity, our religion, politics, every which way they can divide us, they're taking it. And when we take the bait to not love somebody based on one of these factors, not seeing the dividing lines that are being put between us and our fellow human beings that are there being drawn to keep us from loving our neighbor as ourselves, when we don't see that because of the spiritual blindness, We are walking in darkness, whether we know it or not. When you're promoting things of this world, when you're not loving your neighbor because of differences in opinion, especially when it comes down to something like race or sex, things that are God-given, you are walking in darkness when you've been deceived into hating somebody for any of those reasons. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus on the cross. I pray this finds you well. God bless. See you tomorrow.